All right. So yesterday it was a mistake. I stayed up till like 7 and woke up like 4 p.m. It was not good. And luckily it's Sunday, so at least my schedule's not completely destroyed. But yeah, not gonna do that again. So we're just gonna do like 1 hour. 1 to 1.5 hour today. Be restrained. Um around this. Shannon enter the entrance hall to the mansion with a tottering gait. What does that mean? Tottering. Meaning. Walking unsteadily, swaying as if about to fall, describing something weak or close to falling. Okay, so she's like lightheaded from being given the ring. Mixture of exaltation. What the fuck? I've never seen ex. Do I misunderstand what exaltation means? A feeling of great joy. Okay, I did not understand that's what it meant. The uncertainty gave her a feeling that she couldn't easily describe. It swelled up in her chest until it felt like she was about to burst. After stopping for a second in front of the servant room to take a deep breath and calm her heart, she opened the door. I know what Kanon has to say about this. Inside, Gora, who had been ordered to take the midnight shift. Oh, she's at the mansion. At the mansion tonight, I was absorbed in a worn-out crossword puzzle magazine. Okay. He looked up for an instant to see if one of the family had come, but when he realized it was a fellow servant, he returned to his puzzle as if nothing had happened. Genji-sama told me to come and help you. Ah, is that so? That's a relief. I was just about to go check that the mansion was fully locked up, but I felt uneasy about leaving this room unmanned. After all, Crosshammer and the others meeting look as though it will continue for quite some time. They might request some tea at any moment. That's true. Then, what shall we do? Should I watch over? In that case, forgive me, Shannon-san, but I'll ask that you patrol the mansion. I'll stay here, awaiting the family's orders. Yes. Shannon was slightly disgusted. Even though she'd come here to help out as a favor, she was casually being forced to do the job of the person actually on duty. Furthermore, after one-sidedly forcing a task on her, Goda returned to his magazine once again and became immersed in his crossword puzzle. What a simple man, living a simple life. Shannon bowed her head as a token sigh of respect for her elder, then left the room to patrol the mansion. Thanks to her being a bit ticked off, she managed to suppress the floaty feeling she'd been having until just now. Anyway, she couldn't let Genji or Kanon see her looking like this. She wanted a little time to herself until her heart calmed down, so maybe going to patrol wouldn't be so bad. She began to hear the tumultuous voices of the family discussion coming from the dining hall. Is she gonna run into the witch? Someone was speaking at great length, only to be interrupted by someone else. The second person also began to speak in a very long, drawn-out fashion, until yet another person interrupted. I kept on repeating. It was as though their displeasure was seeping out through their voices. She had been told to go to the guest house, so it would be bad if Cross discovered her. Thinking this, Shannon dashed past the dining hall. Then she went along a prearranged route through the dark mansion, checking that all locks were secure. She walked down the hall, checking each window. There were no humans on Lokenjima other than these connected to the family, those. So locking up didn't really serve much of a purpose. No one had been in the habit of locking up at the Ushilamiya family, at least not until Natsuki had scolded them for being careless. Huh. Or so, except Kinzo, who's locked himself up all the time. The metal mixtures on the windows were ice cold, and as she checked them one by one, the glow in her heart seemed to cool down. Hmm? What? The fuck is that? At the time, she thought she saw something twinkling across the hall. Twinkling? How could anything be twinkling through the darkness of the hall? She figured she must have been imagining it, but she still held her breath. Grasping a curtain, she fearfully gazed down the hall. However, other than the occasional crack of thunder brightening the hallway, she was unable to glimpse any flicker again. It must have been her imagination after all. Maybe her heart was so agitated that she'd seen something that didn't even exist. Shanna went back to checking the windows. However, a certain unnerving memory was resurrected in the back of her mind. It was that ghost story which had been passed down amongst the servants who served the Ushilumia head family. The mansion had two different masters, one of the day and one of the night. Beatrice, the master of the night, would sometimes fly around the mansion in the form of sparkling butterflies. That was the story. Okay, that's a new detail. Come to think of it, didn't Kanun-kun once said he'd seen it with his own eyes? Though he got sulky when I said he must have imagined it and refused to believe him. Could it possibly be true? The roar of the thunder gave no answer. Okay, we vibing. Is that supposed to be midnight? Ooh. 4, 5. Nope, just 4. Okay, Beatrice. The vibes are so good. Oh. Got an achievement. Oh. That's the entire chapter? Okay, we're gonna do one more then. It is midnight. Oh shit, we're gonna skip 6 hours? Fuck. Fuck. So much can happen in 6 hours. Day 2. Alright. Genji tightened his bow tie and looked outside through a crack in the curtains. Maybe the rain had died down a tiny bit since the previous night, but the thick rain clouds didn't seem like they'd be letting any trace of the morning sun get by. The morning was dim and far from refreshing. It seems it will last all day after all. I feel like we're gonna see the first death of the game. I don't really know if there's gonna be any deaths, but judging from my only knowledge of the series is stuff I've heard about Higurashi, where I think it's a bunch of kids killing each other. So I'm assuming there's gonna be a lot of death in this game as well. Sorry for keeping you waiting, Genji-sama. Kanon finished checking his appearance and exited the washroom. Under a normal schedule, it was rare for anyone to have to suffer going straight from a midnight shift to an early morning shift. They're on a special schedule for the 2 days of the family conference. However, unless the typhoon passed today, the relatives' stay on this island would last until tomorrow. Kanon thought it best to be prepared for the special schedule to last an extra day. The two of them left the guest house, opening their umbrellas. Right. I was thinking it's kind of weird that they didn't look for Shannon, but I guess they thought Shannon was with the cousins. And yeah, and the cousins are probably told by George that Shannon went to the mansion. The two of them left the guest house, opening their umbrellas. The rose garden had been devastated by the wind and rain on the previous night. Even though they spent several days making it beautiful to welcome the guests, one stormy night was enough to ruin it. Kanon sighed. The two headed for the mansion. They were supposed to meet up with Goda and prepare breakfast. Goda was such a perfectionist that he had probably already woken up and was probably already preparing a breakfast, as exquisite and elegant as glasswork. What does Goda think Shannon did last night? Probably patrolled and went back to guest house? They reached the overhang by the entrance to the mansion and folded up their umbrellas. Genji took a bundle of several keys from his pocket and unlocked the front door. Ushinomiya family mansion was the only thing in Lokenjima, so in the past they hadn't been in the habit of locking up. However, Natsuki had ordered that the mansion be locked up from midnight to early morning. Ever since then, unlocking the door in the early morning had become part of the servants' morning shift. This task had been given to Genji and Kanon, so that Goda could start preparing breakfast as soon as he woke up. Silence had fallen in the mansion, giving the impression that the mansion itself was still asleep. Well then, let us begin the morning chores. Yes, sir. The two of them split up and began opening the curtains throughout the mansion. If the curtains stayed closed, the mansion would remain enveloped in faint darkness, as though it was still trapped in the previous night. Following a well-rehearsed procedure, Kanon went around the mansion opening the curtains for one window after the other, without having to retrace his steps once. Even with this horrible weather, drawing the curtains made it feel a little bit like morning. While doing that, he passed in front of the kitchen. Even though he hadn't smelled anything yet, his stomach started aching for some of Goda's prized cooking. Good morning. He tried to greet Goda, who should have been getting breakfast ready, but Goda was nowhere to be seen. Ooh. The kitchen was darkly lit. Not only were the curtains not open, but the fan wasn't even running. It was still cold without any trace of fire being lit, so of course, there were no signs of breakfast being made either. Though it would have been inexcusable, perhaps Goda had overslept. Even servants are only human. They sometimes sleep in and show up late. In the rare case that such a thing happens, it's part of a servant's code to hide the unsightly scene before anyone notices, smoothly cover it up, and make sure the family never even realizes that anything has gone wrong. Kanon took the receiver of the phone that had been fitted to the wall and dialed the number of the extension line in the servant's sleeping room. He couldn't hear that characteristic sound of a dial tone. Ooh. Kanon tried picking up the receiver again, but even so, he couldn't hear the usual dial tone. He tried dialing again, but it had no apparent effect. Could the lightning last night have damaged some machine, breaking the extension line? The equipment in his mansion was all worn out. Cannon fully understood that even the smallest thing could have caused it to break down. He gave up trying to wake Oda with the phone and dashed over to the servant's sleeping room. What is he about to see? How long has it been since I stopped sleeping and started lazily staring up at the ceiling? A vague sense of awakening was part of Natsu's usual morning experience. She always slept lightly, and she couldn't sleep at all without medicine. To Natsu, sleep was definitely not a happy thing. When she looked outside, she saw that it was still pouring. If she hadn't sensed a tiny amount of light, she might have mistakenly thought it was still the previous night. She herself was one of the hosts, so she mustn't wake up later than her guests. Urging herself on, she raised up her body, which still hadn't completely recovered from yesterday's weariness. No one would torment her as long as she remained inside this room, and her headache wouldn't get any worse here. This room was the only place she could find peace. So when she left, it meant returning to the world where her husband's siblings kept trying to stab each other in the back. In that case, wouldn't it be better to just stay locked up in this room forever? Damn. A ridiculous notion brought a bitter smile to Nasi's face. She was starting to sound like Kinzo. Though she often complained about Kinzo staying locked up in his own room, refusing to attend to everyone else, the truth was that she longed to do the same. Nasi gave her head a small shake, and her fantasy was replaced by the reawakening of her usual headache. When she reached for the doorknob, trying to leave the room, her hand touched the scorpion charm that she had hung from it before going to sleep the previous night. It was Maria's charm, which Natsuki had received from Jessica. Didn't Jessica say something about it having the power to repel magic? Telling her to hang it from her doorknob? Maybe it was thanks to the charm that at least this room had been protected from the malice of her husband's siblings. As she thought this, her mood began to get a little more cheerful. I wonder if I have Jessica to thank for the little bit of peaceful sleep I managed to receive. Then as he remembered, that's right, last night I promised Jessica that I'd give her a charm of my own in exchange for this one, didn't I? Nessie opened a drawer on her dresser and took out an antique accessory case that she had treasured when she was a child. Inside, there were many small objects that Nessie had thought were valuable at the time. From amidst those, she pulled out a red pouch. Inside was a small, round mirror about 10 centimeters across. It's not that small. It looked quite old, but the design on the back of the mirror was very ornate, and it felt like something with historical value. At the very least, it seemed much more authentic than the other charm, which looked like a plastic scorpion keychain. He had heard that this was a spiritual mirror for warding off evil spirits. She had been given it especially by her grandmother when her grandfather's memories had been distributed. Mementos. It had been believed since long ago that a strange power resided in this mirror. Perhaps people thought it could reflect calamity and malice in the same way it reflected light. Natsuki returned the mirror to its pouch. It would probably be a fitting object to hand over to Jessica. Just as she was placing it in her pocket, the sound of someone knocking on the door suddenly echoed throughout the room. Yes? Good morning, madam. It's Genji. My apologies for waking you so early. I'm coming now. What is it? No servant had ever come to her this early in the morning, nor had they come to wake her in person. Perhaps something bad had happened. Maybe some fatal oversight had been made while preparing breakfast. Something that would shame the household in front of her guests. No, 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 no. Something so much worse. Nancy took a deep breath in anticipation of whatever trouble she was about to hear of. When she opened the door, Genji once again gave a morning greeting while bowing deeply. Nancy tentatively responded. Good morning. Did something happen? My apologies. It seemed that the telephones had broken down due to the lightning last night. Okay, that's not so bad. The extension telephone isn't working, so please forgive my coming to you directly. The extension telephone isn't working? That would be troublesome. Will it be possible to fix it? I'm afraid we don't know the location of the damage. Later on, I would like to call in an expert and have him repair it. Does that mean we'll be unable to have it repaired until after the typhoon passes? And it will remain broken down for the duration of our guest's stay. Will it hamper our efforts to care for our guests? We'll do all we can to ensure there are no problems. Very well. I'm counting on you to make sure we have no blunders. Nancy let out a small sigh of relief. She had been prepared for the worst, but damage to the telephones wasn't the kind of trouble she was worried about. Then again, even this would probably be enough to spark sarcasm from Ava. Nancy gave her head a light shake. Are the preparations for breakfast proceeding well? As to that, we haven't been able to find Gora. Okay, he can die. The arrangements for breakfast have yet to be carried out. What did you say? Nancy was indignant. To her, this was a much bigger problem than the phones not working, and despite that, this piece of information was the part that had been postponed. Why did everything go well most of the time, and then come to something like this when the relatives were visiting? Nancy put her hand to her forehead and shook her head. Well, I suppose he slept in. Any rate, just see to it that someone hurries up and prepare breakfast. I don't care who. What? Nancy exited into the hall and turned around for a second to close the door to her room. The creepy thing she saw there silenced her completely. What? It was an unpleasant sight, as though someone had dipped their fingers in a reddish-black liquid and scratched at the door around the doorknob. What the fuck? It was probably some sort of awful prank, arranged by some person who wanted to make it look as though they tried to force the door with bloody hands. What sort of prank is this? How awful. I also just noticed it as I came to call you. I will clean it later. Perhaps. This is a vulgar joke by one of the guests? Disgusting. Truly disgusting. Who in the world would pull such a childish and disgusting prank? Nancy had a pretty good idea, but of course there was no proof. So even if she pushed the issue, it would just seem as though she was making a fuss about nothing. In fact, it would surely be better to act as though she hadn't even realized that such a prank had been played on her. Nancy gave the order to have it cleaned and headed off to the parlor. What the fuck? It seems like so much fucking happened last night. The parlor, with a squeak over her heels. When Natsuki and Genji arrived in the parlor, Eva and Hideyoshi were already there. Okay, at least they seem... Good morning, everyone. Morning, Natsuki-san. Yeah, they seem normal. I heard Goda-san will be making us breakfast too. My stomach has been getting all excited since I woke up. Wahaha. After all, it seems food is all you can look forward to at the head family household. Giggle giggle. I'm pleased to see that you two are in high spirits so early in the morning, Eva-san. With a wary expression, as he returned Eva's gaze, which was fiercely competitive despite the early hour. Then Kanon jogged in. After bowing apology to relatives for running inside the mansion, he noticed Genji and told him something in a very small voice. Kanon, have you still not found Gora? My apologies, madam. I went all over the inside of the mansion and the guest house, but I still haven't found him. Where in the world has he gone? At any rate, breakfast is higher priority than finding Gora right now. See to it immediately. Yes. Kanon glanced at Genji. It seemed he had something else to report, but was uncertain whether or not the words should come from him. Genji nodded and decided to give the report himself. Madam, it is not only Gora. Your husband is also nowhere to be found. My husband? Yes. Even before visiting you, I went to his room and tell him that breakfast wasn't being prepared, but I did not find him there. Furthermore, he is not the only one missing. Rudolph-sama, his wife, and Rosa-sama are nowhere to be found. Okay. Not in the guest house? Not the mansion? Nor the mansion? Yes, they were not in their room in the guest house either. When she'd heard that Goda alone was missing, she'd assumed he had slipped in or was loafing around somewhere. However, now that she learned that several of the relatives were also nowhere to be seen, she began to take a slightly more optimistic view. Could last night's family conference have continued all night, up until the present moment? If so, they might have wanted to cool their heads after being shut in a stuffy room. Going out for walks on their own through the rain. The part about cooling their heads really sounded like something Cross would say. Goda had probably been summoned to accompany them and aid them in some way. Goda was not a man who lost track of time. He had to understand that preparation for breakfast were being hindered if he did not return. However, maybe the family conference had continued until this very moment, with an atmosphere that would make it hard for anyone to slip out. Yes, that theory would be quite convincing for Nasi. She remembers the illusion she'd felt that morning as though the previous night had never ended. What about Shannon and Kumasawa? When she learned that the feeling wasn't just an illusion, she once again took a deep, weary breath. After all, the banquet of filthy vultures circling Kinzo's property was still going on. Perhaps they're still discussing the inheritance somewhere in the garden, or maybe the beach. Any rate, if we don't call Goda back, we'll never be able to begin preparations for the breakfast. So what are you saying? Are Nissan and the rest just still continuing their discussion? She had planned to say it in a small voice, but Hideyoshi overheard Nasuhi and managed to grasp the situation. Nissan and Rudolph sure are tough. Maybe it's just youth. In Rosa's case? Huh? Just a bit after midnight, the two of us were so tired that we head back to bed. Though I do remember that Nissan and the rest were still having a heated discussion at that point. Men certainly are unpleasant when they get all fired up. Elsie snorted, her face still blank. Kano, search outside. If you find Goda, tell him to return immediately and begin preparing breakfast. Certainly. Let's see, Nissan. We don't know for sure that they're outside, do we? Couldn't they also be inside Father's study? I see, that's certainly possible. I don't know what path their conversation took, but there's certainly a chance they moved to Father's study and let him in on the conversation, on the discussion. I can't imagine that Father would willingly let them bring such a detestable topic into study. You really think so? Well then, there's nothing we can do. I'm sorry, Genji-san. And Kanon-kun, but could you search outside? Wouldn't be that strange for Nissan to suggest they go outside for a walk to cool their heads, even in this weather. I'll go to Father's study. Who knows? They might actually be there after all. Eva-san, I couldn't ask a guest like you to exert herself, so I will go. I can also wish him a good morning while I'm at it. Oh then, I'll leave it in your hands. Though I somehow doubt he'll return your greeting. Nasine-san, have you always been on such good terms with Father? I don't know whether you could call it that, but I'm sure that I have gained his trust as the wife of the successor to the Ushinomiya family. I'm sure he'll at least answer you, right? I'd like to at least have breakfast with Father. You think you can convince him to come down and join us? It seems that he thoroughly despised the rest of us, but I'm sure he'll listen to you, if he trusts you that much. After speaking so boldly, if you're unable to convince Father to come down alone, then I doubt you'll ever be able to claim that you've earned his trust again. Giggle. I'm not confident, but I will try. Nessie responded, looking discouraged. However, knowing Kinzo's temperament, she had absolutely no confidence in her ability to bring him out. It was clearly mocking her, confident that Nessie wouldn't be able to get Kinzo to come down. But even so, Nessie would lose face if she gave up, saying it was impossible and letting Eva go inside. It was mean-spirited and unreasonable demand that made Nessie clench her fist slightly. When Genji realized this, he softly spoke to her over her shoulder. Madam, please take this, if you would. And this is? Genji handed Nessie a sparkling gold key of ornate design. It was the key to Kinzo's study. The study had an autolock and couldn't be unlocked as long as Kinzo forbade entrance. However, since Genji was especially trusted by Kinzo, he was allowed to carry a key to that door. But if this key is used, won't you also receive the blame? The master is sleeping deeply. Simply knock on the door will not suffice, and it would be more difficult to persuade the master to leave his room if you must talk through the door. Please use this. Genji? I think Genji is suspecting that something bigger is happening. Until now, Nasi had thought of Genji as a cold servant who wouldn't do anything for her, since he worked directly under Kinzo. But it looked like she would have to alter her understanding of him. She wanted to communicate her gratitude, but by then, Genji had already turned his back on her and was walking down the corridor with Kanon. But as Natsuki watched them go, the words directed at her from behind were sneering. Well then, you must bring father with you, okay? After all, it's his son's precious wife who's asking. I'm sure he'll listen to you. Giggle giggle. We're guests, so we'll just relax here, at our leisure. Eva, you're taking this too far. Sorry, Natsuki-san, but we're counting on you to deal with father. Without answering, Natsuki forcefully spun around on her heels and quickly left that place. After all that excitement the previous night, there was no way anyone was going to wake up early. George, Aniki, Jessica, and I were snoring loudly on the beds in the cousin room, but Maria, who had gone straight to bed without joining in, was completely awake. As she rubbed her sleepy eyes and looked around, she was met with the loud snoring of the other three cousins. For a while, Maria had to think about what had happened. After that, she realized that her mother wasn't with her, and she quickly got lonely. Maria left the cousin room, trying to head to the room that had been arranged for her and her mother. Paying no heed to the three who were sleeping soundly, she slammed the door shut. In response, Battler mumbled and rolled over in his sleep, but it wasn't enough to wake him up. After a while, Maria returned, once again opening the door with a lively bang. Ooh! When she had left the room, her face had been sleepy, but now that she's back, she looked irritated. After that, she climbed out Battler's bed, which happened to be the closest, and started yelling and jumping on it like it was trampoline. Ooh, wake up! Ooh. What? Is it an enemy raid? Surround them! After making sure I was awake, Maria moved over to George Aniki's bed and started jumping on that too. In that manner, the three of us were all greeted with an extremely pleasant awakening. Thanks for waking us up, Maria-chan. You stopped us from sleeping in after that late night. If only you could have been a little more gentle about it. George Nisan, you really are an adult. I respect that. You'll be 7 soon. Well, it's not really a bad time to wake up. Yawn. Ooh, Mama's not here. Ooh. Aunt Rosa? She wasn't in her room? I wonder if she's already woken up and gone to the mansion. Not here! Ooh, Mama! Ooh. Maria kept groaning. Ooh, and looking unhappy. She didn't exactly seem lonely because her mother wasn't around. It was more like she was irritated and thrown off balance because her mother wasn't there where she expected. Control is important to her, it seems. If we could just tell her where her mother was, that alone would probably calm her down. But unfortunately, we had no way of knowing where Aunt Rosa was, except that she wasn't here. Anyway, it's time for breakfast, so let's head over to the mansion. That's right. Maria, let's go to the mansion together, okay? I'm sure Aunt Rosa will be there too. Ooh, Mama is in the mansion? Then I'll go there. Ooh. Yeah, guess we should go to the mansion. Our parents had probably already gone there. Maria regained her usual composure so completely. The earlier tantrum now seemed like a lie. We got dressed, left the room, and headed for the mansion. Once more, there was a knocking sound on the study door, but there was no answer. He seemed to be sleeping still, and I could not wake him. She went back downstairs and said something like that. Ava will probably be amused and triumphant. Even putting Ava aside, it was problematic that Kinzo had stayed shut away during this entire once-a-year conference, not even coming down to greet anyone. Even the family head, no, especially the family head, couldn't fail to make an appearance. I wonder if I can convince him myself, as he readied herself and used the key that she'd borrowed from Genji to open the door. Even though she was prepared for the sweet stench, which seemed to eat into one's brain as it poured out the small crack in the door, she couldn't help but grimace. Thinking that he might still be sleeping, Natsuki entered the room quietly. When she did, Kinzo was already awake and looking down out of the window. "So you're awake. Good morning. How did you get in?" Kinzo spoke with his back still facing her. His voice was not harsh but calm, and Natsuki was slightly reassured. However, though he was awake, he wouldn't have ignored all the knocking if he was in a good mood. Natsuki wasn't able to relax. "My sincere apologies. I asked Genji-san, and he allowed me to borrow the keys to the study." The key to the study. Oh, Genji did? My friend thought it was that important, then I have no choice but to listen. "So, what business do you have with me?" "Well, breakfast will be ready soon, and I would greatly appreciate if you would join us. I will eat here. Have it brought here like always." "But father, this family conference happens only once a year. Please, at least let them see your face." "Go back downstairs." "Are you asking me to join in as they discuss how to chew up my inheritance after I die? How foolish." "Let them speak of such matters as much as they please without me, and if that's what you call a family conference, it's hardly worth leaving my room for it. I'm busy. Do not bother me." His last words carried a threat that any further questions would not be appreciated. Thus he realized that adding any further pleas would finally bring his wrath down upon her. She didn't look forward to facing Ava's sarcasm, but there was nothing more Natsuki could do. "Is that so? Understood. I'm sure everyone will be sorry to hear it. I will tell them." Natsuki decided to give up. Bowing silently, she tried to leave the room before Kinzo's spasmodic temper could flare up. As she did, Kinzo spoke to her. His voice was so calm and gentle, it felt like it came from an entire different person. "Natsuki, it's been quite some time since you married into the Ushinomiya family." Yes, it's been many years since I was first permitted to bear the name Ushinomiya. "Do you sometimes long for a previous family?" "No. Marriage means abandoning your birth family. I am Ushinomiya Natsuki. The Ushinomiya family is the only family I can come home to, the only one I am fond of." She truly wasn't exaggerating. Such was the resolve she felt whenever she applied the Ushinomiya family name to herself. And that's precisely why she was so saddened when her husband didn't treat her like an Ushinomiya, leaving her to race about in vain. If Cross were a woman, and you his husband, no, I won't say that. What do you mean by that, father? Natsuki was shocked. If Kinzo's words just now were what they seemed, it wouldn't be more than enough to make up for all her suffered, all she'd suffered up to that point. Forget it. It's just the nonsense of an old man. Kinzo once again faced away from her. He told her to forget it, but Natsuki couldn't help feeling a warmth in her heart. "Father, even though I, Natsuki, am not connected to you by blood, I'm still your daughter. I will most assuredly see to it that your honor and glory and everything you have left behind are protected. You do not have the right to wear the one-winged eagle. However, the one-winged eagle is surely engraved in your heart. That is irrefutable proof that you are my blood relative, one who will inherit the glory of the Ushinomiya family. Some will sneer that there is no eagle in your clothes, but such words are not worth lending an ear to. Only those who hold the ego in their hearts are my true blood relatives. Holy shit! What the fuck? Why has Kinzo suddenly had this huge turn? What the fuck? I'm not considering honor that you were welcomed into the Ushilomia family. Without saying anything more, Kinzo remained with his back to Natsu. However, Natsu couldn't help but feel something warm well up inside her that she hadn't felt since long ago, when she had been just a child. Natsu bowed silently to his back and left the room. Ah, good timing. How is father? You were taking so long, so I came to check. When Natsu left the study, she saw Eva climbing the stairs, and their eyes met. Eva was smirking unpleasantly, thinking that Natsu would leave grudgingly after failing to convince Kinzo. However, the way Natsu was now, such a frivolous laugh would not disturb her. She was not permitted to wear the family crest on her clothing, but she was permitted to wear it in her heart. So she spoke calmly, clearly, and confidently, with the dignity of the one who would protect the Ushilomia family's glory. Father said he would not join us on the family conference. He says he has no interest in discussing such obscene matters. I figure you say something like that. If you fail to persuade father, just say so. How pitiful. I'm beginning to see why father lamented so. What do you mean by that? Natsu did not answer. Just as Kinzo had done earlier, she showed Eva her back as she headed down the stairs. Eva finally realized that she was being made fun of, that something had happened to quickly bolster Natsu's confidence. Even so, she apparently didn't have the courage to risk Kinzo's wrath. Unable to even knock on the door, she could only click her tongue, make a motion as though scratching at it, and follow after Natsu. So, were Nissan and the rest there? Did you ask father about them? I didn't get the chance to ask, but they were not inside the study. Father would never let them into his room to discuss such a lowly topic, so it is unlikely he knows where they went. Let us go downstairs and wait for the servants to return from their search. Breakfast may be late. How would you like some tea, Eva-san? That'll be fine. Eva couldn't hide the confusion at the complete difference. In Natsu's attitude. She was acting so boldly, and while Eva hated to admit it, she even had a sense of dignity about her. Very nice to see. Unable to find fault with anything, Eva could only follow Natsu back to the parlor. When the two of them returned to the parlor, Hideyoshi had been joined by the 4 children and Nanjo. Genji, who had been talking with Hideyoshi, reported the current situation when he noticed that Natsu had returned. You still have not found my husband and the rest? Yes, my apologies. Also, Kumasawa has started preparing breakfast. At least, she's not disappeared. What about Shannon, though? She said that she will need just a little longer. The clock read a little past 8. 8 a.m. should have been the time to start breakfast. Normally, going over the time limit would be a disgrace to the host. Kano is now searching outside. Also, no one has seen Shannon either. Even Shannon's missing? Truly, just how many people did my husband bring with him on his little walk? Just how many people had gone missing by now? Now that the number was this large, it was starting to feel truly unpleasant. As though the people here were the only ones being left out of something interesting. At least that seemed to reflect the feelings of the children and Maria in particular. She was indignant, her stomach grumbling, almost as though her mother and the others had left her alone to go off and eat something delicious without her. The other children were flipping through the channels on the television, trying to find a program that might interest Maria and cheer her up again. Nanjo was sitting on the sofa, gazing blissfully at the children while reading a book. It must have been a book about chess. The sound of footsteps came rushing towards them with a pitter-plat. What the fuck? Pitter-patter. There was only one set, so they realized before seeing who it belonged to that it was probably Kano, no Cross, and the rest. Madam, excuse me. Judging by your appearance, you still haven't been able to find them. My apologies, I still haven't. That will be enough. You worked hard. She didn't know where they were, but they had to be somewhere on this island. They hadn't had a thing to eat since the previous night, so their stomachs must be growling about now. They probably come plodding back of their own accord before long. By now, Nasi was thoroughly exasperated and started to feel that there was no reason for them to go out of their way and search. What does Kinzo know? I'm so curious. I'll go to the kitchen to prepare some tea for all of the guests. Thanks to both of you for all your hard work so early in the morning. As he left the parlor, acting as though the release intention had caused a new surge in her headache. Kanon tried to call her back, and as he left swiftly. What is it? Was there something else? Yes. I was unable to find her husband or anything else, but, well, Kanon sounded evasive. It looked as though he didn't know where they were, but had spotted something that might be connected to their disappearance. Eva and Hideyoshi noticed this exchange of words and came over. They probably picked up on something strange in Kanon's behavior. What's going on, Kanon-kun? Did you find Cross Nissan and everyone else? Actually, the Rose Garden storehouse looked strange. What do you mean? It looked strange? It was, how should I explain it? Kanon hesitated once more. His tone wasn't at all what you expect from this usually fearless boy. Seeing this, Eva and Hideyoshi looked at each other dubiously. What do you mean? Are you saying Nissan and the others were inside the storehouse? No, I'm going to inspect the inside now. Just now I came back to get the key, but I don't really get it, but it sounds like you just gotta look around inside it. Where's the key to that storehouse? It's in the servant room. Let us check inside the storehouse at once. What do you mean it looked strange? Kanon dashed off to the servant room and returned with the key. Genji left the parlor, saying that he would go check, but then Eva and Hideyoshi followed after him. What was this something strange about the storehouse that had caused the usually fearless Kanon to hesitate? It was still pouring outside. Perhaps their curiosity over this something that Kanon couldn't talk about won out. While the children made a big fuss watching television, Kanon and the rest dashed over to the entrance. The Rose Garden storehouse was a place that housed various tools used to manage the garden. It was definitely not a pretty building. Because of its appearance, it had been built so that it was hitting a corner in the rose garden. Kanon, Genji, Eva, and Hideyoshi came cutting across the rose garden holding umbrellas. They entered a small path just off the rose garden, which was normally off limits for those appreciating the garden, only used by those maintaining it. As they dashed down that, the storehouse came into view in front of them. Okay. It was quite an old shed, and compared to the flawless, perfect beauty of the rose garden, it was pretty seedy looking. It was easy to understand why it had been built in a hard-to-see place. Eva and Hideyoshi arrived at the storehouse long after Kano and Genji. Ha! Ha! You two sure are fast. I thought my heart was gonna explode. I never knew they had the storehouse way over here. But what is that? What? When Eva looked to where Kanon was pointing, she was at a loss for words. Noticing this, Hideyoshi also followed Kanon's finger and was likewise too shocked to speak. The entrance to the storehouse was a kind of shutter. And there, everyone suddenly realized why Kanon had been unable to find words to describe what they now saw. On the shutter, which was completely filthy from being exposed to wind and rain for so long, stuck right on it. Huh? There was something that looked like a strange, dark red liquid. Mucus? Or maybe it was some sticky paint. An indescribably eerie shape was drawn on the shutter with some kind of ghastly substance. The rain had caused it to drip down like fresh blood leaking from an open wound. No more beating around the bush. Some kind of mark was drawn here, with a ghastly substance that looked like blood. in a shape that seemed to suggest something ominous. 2 circles were drawn here, and inside them was a design that looked like a cross. The 4 ends of the cross were widely exaggerated and it looked like some kind of crest from somewhere around Europe. And in the cracks between these shapes, written closely, packed together, were some unfamiliar characters or possibly symbols. What a vulgar bit of graffiti. Could this be one of those? One of those magic circles used in demonic ceremonies? It wasn't surprising that Hideyoshi would say that about such a ghastly shape, drawn with a deep red, dripping substance. When was this made? There was nothing drawn here when I came back yesterday, before it started raining. We must do something before anyone else sees this. If they lay eyes upon it, it will cause them great discomfort. That's right, even though it's just a shed, I wouldn't want to leave such an unpleasant piece of graffiti alone for even a second longer than I had to. There's some paint inside the storehouse. Let us paint over it temporarily as an emergency measure, and repaint it again someday when the weather's good. Genji remembered that he had just recently seen another scribble, and that it too had been made with a strange dark red substance of the same color as this. Wait, what did I... It must have been... That's right, he had seen it on the door to Natsu's room. Okay. Kanon-kun, let's remove this scribble quickly and go back, okay? Even though it's just a storehouse, it's really irritating to have graffiti around the home I was brought up in. How about you check inside first? Yes ma'am, I'll take care of it immediately. Kanon squatted in front of the shutter and unlocked it. He then lifted it up with all of his strength. A boisterous noise resounded, and the eerie shape drawn on the shutter began to get sucked in through the top as the shutter was raised. At least for the time being, the ominous drawing disappeared from their direct gaze, and they all breathed a sigh of relief. Thanks to a kids program they came across, Maria was feeling much better. Battler and Jessica were poking fun at the kids show at every turn, cackling together. George was enjoying the program with Maria from her perspective. What did I fucking read? The program with Maria from her perspective. Okay, I see. Nanjo sat on the sofa by himself, passing the time by reading quietly. They heard hurried footsteps coming from the hallway. They were the footsteps of a single person. Did I mean it wasn't a group of 4 that just left? It was Genji. It was very rare for Genji, who considered being out of breath a violation of a servant's virtues, to be gasping for air. They'd probably come dashing back from outside the mansion. His shoulders were soaking wet and he didn't have his usual trim appearance. When Genji noticed Nanjo looking at him, he gave a small, silent bow and quickly approached him. Dr. Nanjo, my apologies. Please come with me quickly. What? What is the matter? As Nanjo whispered something into Nanjo's... As Genji whispered something into Nanjo's ear, Nanjo went pale. He rose from the sofa, trying not to be noticed by the children, who were still engrossed by the TV. And 2 of them rapidly left the parlor, muffling their footsteps. Okay, we're finally gonna see some dead bodies. Just as they were about to exit the parlor, they came across Nasi, who was pushing a servant car loaded with a tea set. Genji whispered something into Nasi's ear, and Nasi went pale too in apparent shock. Then, leaving the service car where it was, 3 of them dashed towards the entrance. George noticed them running down the rose garden through the window. What's that? Isn't that Genji-san and Dr. Nanjo, and that's Aunt Nasi, isn't it? What's up, Naniki? Maybe something happened. They looked terribly flustered. When Jessica and Maria saw that Eva, Hideyoshi, and Nanjo were no longer in their seats, and that the serving car had been abandoned in the entrance of the parlor, they also realized that something was the matter. Could there be some kind of accident? Let's go check it out. It's no fun if we're the only ones left out, right? Hehehe. For some reason, what Battler said sounded extremely indiscreet. but they couldn't deny that they were a little insecure and concerned after seeing the adults run off into the rain without regards of their appearance. Let's check it out, okay? I'm worried something might have happened. Jessica's uneasy words spoke for all of them. Hey Maria, are you coming too? Or will you watch TV? Ooh, wanna watch TV? Ooh. Gonna leave her alone? Let's go on without her, Maria-chan. We'll be back soon. You keep watching TV, okay? Ooh. By the time the kids made it outside, the adults were no longer in sight, but Jessica seemed to have a pretty good idea where they'd gone, judging by the direction they've been running. Following Jessica, we ran through the rain-soaked rose garden. The wind seemed to suddenly get stronger. The malicious sounds of thunder began to rumble, like it had the previous night. It felt like an eerie something had surrounded the island and was trying to stop us from moving forward. Jessica, there's something over this way? I'm pretty sure there's a shed of gardening tools or something. What in the world could be going on in a place like that? Just as Jessica had said, they began to see a storehouse in front of them. They could also see the adults there. The shutter to the storehouse was open, and several adults looked as though they were searching for something. For some reason, only Natsuki was outside the storehouse. Without even holding an umbrella, she looked like she was hanging her head. Her back was facing them. There was Genji, Nanjo, and Natsuki, who had just left the mansion. The ones who left earlier, Kanon, Eva, and Hideyoshi, were also there, making for a small crowd of people. There was absolutely no bustle of activity. The anticipation is so good. When Natsuki realized that the children were approaching, a terrible expression rose to her face, and she ran at them with her arms spread wide. You mustn't come any closer, go back to the mansion. But despite that, no, because of that, the kids saw this scene Natsuki was trying to keep them away from. Inside the storehouse, with its shutter wide open, a faint fluorescent light shone down. And right there was... Yeah! Jessica's piercing shriek rang out. I hope Gora is dead. That was just because Jessica's scream was the loudest. The same thing spilled out of Battler and George's mouth as well. Eva spread her arms just like Natsuki, roaring at the kids with a bone-chilling expression on her face. George, take everyone and return to the mansion. Quickly. Right now. And Natsuki spread her arms. I thought she was trying to prevent us from advancing any further. But that wasn't why Eva was spreading her arms right now. She was trying to stop us kids from seeing that terrible scene. It was her mother's heart, trying to protect the eyes of hearts of us children by blocking our view of that terrible scene. At least the width of one of her arms. Is this some kind of joke? Is it? I'd seen this kind of cheap scene all too often. In manga, TV, anime, and movies. I'd seen it over and over again. This was just seeing something appear in real life. I had been seen plenty of times before in some of those more sensational movies, right? That alone shouldn't. Ah, but that suit. It's that old bastard's, isn't it? Damn. I get it. Then that's Uncle Cross. Everyone? And Kilie-san and Rosa. Dad! You mustn't, Jessica. You mustn't go in. You mustn't look. Dad, ah! Rigor mortis has set in across almost the entire body. Most likely 6 hours or more. 6 hours or more have passed since death. As far as I can tell by looking at the damaged area, there's a high probability that they were damaged after their deaths. Holy. Now I must watch what I say. I'm a general practitioner. Examining corpses is outside of my area of expertise. So what's going on here? Just killing them wasn't enough? So they went on to do something like this? The devil is here. The work of the devil. Aunt Natsuki called Jessica in her arms and Aunt Eva called George Aniki. So I was the only one who could approach the entrance to the storehouse. Ah, if only there had been someone there to catch me too. Wouldn't have needed to have this horrible, evil scene burned into my eyes. Nope, that's not it. Isn't that there's no one here to catch me. The people who should catch me, they're right here, aren't they? Just as Jessica said, it did look like a storehouse for gardening tools. a lawnmower with extra blades, a grass sickle and hammer, some carpentry tools such as a saw, piled up potted plants and bags of fertilizer. And treated just the same, the corpses of several people have been laid to rest here. No, have been tossed in there. I could tell them by their clothes. The old bastard and Kirie-san, Uncle Cross and Aunt Rosa, beyond that, Gora-san and... Are there still more of them? Shannon? How many people died? You're fucking kidding me. That's more than I can count on one hand. Damn it! I didn't know whether it had been one of these gardening tools, which, if used for something other than their intended purpose, could definitely be wielded with a naked brutality, or whether some horrible tool had been brought in here specifically for this. Anyway, each one of the bodies jammed in here had been given an atrocious makeup. It wasn't makeup, it was more like their faces had been plowed. Their faces were smashed, forced into expressions that normal people couldn't make even after death. What the fuck? I couldn't tell where the eyes or the noses were, but I could find their mouths because they were gaping wide, their gums exposed. Teeth? But their front teeth were missing, and even the cheeks that should have covered all this were all torn up and laid bare. What the fuck? That trendy makeup you always spend so much time on, even though you're a man, isn't doing a thing now. Okay. Dad! Always thought you were going to hell. But still, not like this, right? You weren't such a son of a bitch that you should have suffered so brutally. And Kirie-san, didn't I tell you to stop going out with this guy? There's absolutely no reason for you to end up like this too. They've got no faces, no faces. Damn it, damn it, damn it. Ah. Battler-san, you mustn't look anymore. There's no way your mother and father will want you to see them like this. For their sakes, you mustn't look anymore. Dead people are supposed to have faces that look like they're sleeping peacefully, right? They've got no faces. My dad and Kirie-san have no faces. I've even known. I don't even know what kind of faces they were wearing when they died. What's wrong with me? What's wrong with you? I'll have to see these smashed monster-like faces every time I remember them. Yeah, holy shit, that's brutal. That's just great. I didn't want to remember that old bastard's smug face anyway. Just great, just great. Why even Kirie-san's face? Kirie-san wasn't a crook. Sure, she'd tick me off a bit now and then, but she was like a cool big sister to me. It's wrong. It's all wrong. At least Uncle Cross has it better, doesn't he? It's not his whole face, just the side. At least he's got half his face left, right? That's still better. That's still better. No. Jessica filled her ears with the sound of her own screaming. Try to shut out my reckless words. Stop it, Battle-kun. Just stop it, just stop it. Aniki, Aniki! Ah! Disregarding age and appearance, I fell to my knees, clinging to Aniki's waist and sobbing. It was as if I was crying on behalf of everyone there. Representing the feelings of everyone there. I screamed over and over. Damn. And when you go back to the mansion, Maria's gonna have like another letter or some shit. Father, the ones lying over there are Uncle Cross, Uncle Rudolph, Aunt Kirie, and Aunt Rosa and Goda-san. Just those 5, right? No, there are 6 people. There's one more person over here. The body Hideyoshi was looking down on now happened to be hidden among the shadows in that mountain range of objects, in a blind spot to George, who stood by the entrance, so George couldn't tell whose body it was. So George cursed himself. He cursed the fact that his worst guesses always turn out to be right. So, the one lying at your feet is Shannon, isn't it? Yes, it's Shannon-chan. George fell completely silent. He shook slyly, his lower lip trembling. Normally he would have wanted to run to his beloved's body, screaming and crying. However, before rashly rushing forward, he worked to keep his composure and asked his father, "Is Shannon the same as Uncle Cross and the others?" Hideyoshi deeply understood the meaning of those words, so he couldn't give George an immediate answer, but rather he felt that silence was the only sincere and loving response he could give George right now. When George asked if Shannon was the same, he meant to ask whether her corpse was in the same condition as the others or not. Since Hideyoshi hadn't denied it, it meant her corpse was in the same brutal state. "Can I look at Shannon?" "No, you cannot." "Why not? After all, I won't be able to see Shannon's face again, right? So, why won't you let me see what her face looked like at the end?" "The last time you met Shannon-chan was yesterday, right?" "Yes." "I see. When you left her, what kind of face was she showing you?" It was a wonderful smile. After he handed her the ring, she hesitated even though she must have already made up her mind. Then she looked bashful and ran away because she was embarrassed to let him see her face looking like that. That's the expression that was revived in George's mind. "I see. Then I'm sure Shannon-chan will want to leave you with that smile in your memory." Hideyoshi looked down upon Shannon's body lying at his feet. Just like the other bodies, it was in such a horrible state that it made anyone want to cover their eyes. Her head had been smashed in from the side, what the fuck, and no more than half of her expression remained. With the remaining blood-soaked half of her expression had been wiped clean, but that graceful smile of hers had peeked out. Only half of it. Without thinking, Hideyoshi slapped his hands over his eyes. How brutal. If her face was going to be crushed anyway, then if only all of it had been crushed, he might have been able to temporarily distract George from his pain by making the pathetic suggestion that it was someone else wearing Shannon's clothes. Half of her face had been left untouched. It caused the body so much humiliation. What? While still proving beyond doubt that the body was Shannon's and no one else. How inhuman, how brutish. And there, trying his best to burn the image of the remaining half of Shannon's expression into his eyes as she lay at Hideyoshi's feet, was Kano. Kano was not crying. Tears had risen to his eyes, but they did not drip down. But that didn't mean he wasn't feeling as much sadness as everyone else. Losing Shannon, who had lived with him in the same orphanage, who she had loved as a sister, must have been just the same as losing a blood relative. "George, I'm sure Shannon-chan is saying thank you. She must be glad you didn't end up seeing her in such a pitiful state. I'm sure she's thanking you for holding strong and showing restraint." "I understand. Understand, father. I understand." George leaned against the outside wall of the storehouse, crouching down limply. "Father, I have a request." What is it?" "I want you to look for me." "Is there a ring on Shannon's finger?" "A ring? Let me see." Hideyoshi crouched down. As he did, Kano silently pointed to one of Shannon's hands. "Yeah, there is. It's a diamond ring. With a valuable diamond. Must have been pretty expensive." "And? Which hand and which finger is it on?" The ring finger of the left hand." "I see. So Shannon-chan was engaged?" "George, don't tell me you..." "Ava, that doesn't matter now. The man made a lifelong promise to Shannon-chan. The man promised her happiness for life. Who that man was isn't the issue here. Being told that by a man is a woman's dream, isn't it? I don't know when she received this ring. I also don't know who gave it to her. However, even so, Shannon-chan took this ring, then she accepted it and put it on her left ring finger. I'm sure the man who gave it to her was also happy. To most of the people there, Hideyoshi was simply disturbed by this extraordinary situation and was blurting out nonsense. However, someone who knew of George and Shannon's true relationship understand the full meaning of these words. I see. Thank you, Father. George stood up. The traces of tears still streaked his face, but his expression had returned to its usual calm one. Let's go, Battler-kun, Jessica-chan. If we stay here any longer, we'll get in the way of the adults. Sniff. You're right. Jessica sniffled once, showing her face to her mother, who had been holding her the whole time, to let her know she was okay now. When she faced George again, she once again had on her usual expression, although she still couldn't smile. Battler, hanging there. Battler kept on crouching in front of his parents' bodies. I'm sorry, crying like hell, calm me down. You bastard dead. I bet you're laughing at me, after all that shit I talked about you. Here I'm crying like a baby just 'cause you died. Well, so what? I guess I just got the genes that make you cry when your parents kicked the bucket. Battler's face was still bright red from the tears, but he had at least recovered enough to fake a smile, if only a bitter one. Kanon, you mustn't remain there any longer either. Take the children and return to the mansion. Elsie had been standing under the rain this whole time, unable to take a step into the storehouse. Maybe she had her own way of grieving, different from Battler's. Realizing that she had to take on the role of a responsibility, now that her husband was dead, she gave Kanon those orders. Yes, madame. Kanon rose silently and turned to face me. His face was pure white, almost as though his own heart had died alone with Shannon. And there was no life in his expression. On an ordinary day, if he had been told a guide to guide the children through the beautiful rose garden, Kano might have led the way. But now there was no distinction between Kano and the children. They were now just kids of about the same age, suffering the pain of losing those close to them. After making sure that the children were leaving, Natsuki started giving orders to Genji. Genji, contact the police immediately. They probably won't be able to come until the typhoon passes, but they should be able to tell us what to do next. Understood. There's an emergency radio, so I will use that to contact them. When she heard that, Natsuki remembered. That's right, the phones were out today, weren't they? However, they also had a radio, since they couldn't necessarily rely on phones all the time while living on an isolated island. At any rate, they should start by contacting the police and receiving their instructions. Everything else could wait. Dr. Nanjo, is there anything more we can do here? Unfortunately, there's nothing I can do. Understood. Genji, could you at least cover their faces with something? Exposing them like this is humiliating to them as well. Yes, ma'am. Genji picked up several dried up towels from inside the storehouse when Ava stopped him with a shrill voice. Wait a second, stop. This is the scene of the crime, isn't it? Then we mustn't disturb it. We all panicked and walked in here with our shoes on, but even that will surely get in the way of the police investigation, right? Nazi glared at Ava, offended. Objectively speaking, Ava was right. Even so, she glared at Ava as though accusing her of refusing to do those tragic corpses. Huh? Which had been humiliated even after death. The simple kindness of covering their faces. Oh. However, Ava had spoken both calmly and correctly. The horrible situation definitely wasn't an accident, it was a crime. Someone had killed them. It was a murder case. So, they needed to be careful to avoid disturbing the site any further. They had to do what little they could to aid the police, preserving clues that might help catch the detestable culprit. I agree with Ava-san. Until the police come, we should leave everything be. What do you say, madame? You're right. Very well. Close it up. And just in case, we should put a different lock on it. A different lock? Yes. When we came here, the shutter was locked. That means the culprit used the key to the shutter to lock it. That makes sense. So, does that mean the key that opens the shutter will have the culprit's fingerprints on it? I'm sure it would be worth submitting it to the police as evidence. but Kanun-kun usually has it. And he used it to unlock the shed just now. They probably have Kanon's fingerprints on it. Also, that key was handed to Genji-san just now, and he took it with his bare hands. It doesn't look like it'll be very useful as evidence. That was careless of me. My apologies. Genji-san, are there any other keys to this storehouse? No, only this one. So the culprit walked out of the servant room with that key, and then was nice enough to return the key to where they found it. Hideyoshi's theory sounded plausible, but was actually very strange if you thought about it. Why would they go to all the trouble of returning a key they stole? No, if you think about it even more deeply, there are some points that are even more bizarre. When a criminal hides a body, they're usually trying to delay the point at which it'll be found, so they can use the time to escape. The six weren't necessarily killed here. It was reasonable to assume that they were killed somewhere on this island, carried to this storehouse, and hidden to delay the discovery of crime. And yet the eerie magic circle scribbled on the storehouse shutter had eloquently indicated the location of the hidden corpses. Sure, it didn't explicitly mention the corpses, but 6 people had gone missing. In that situation, someone had made such an obvious piece of graffiti and even returned the key to the shutter. Almost as though they wanted the corpses here to be discovered. Huh. Anyway, we can't put all our faith in the lock that the culprit had opened once before. If we want to protect this place from the culprit's hand, I think we should put a new lock on it. I think that's a good plan. I agree. Genji fished around inside the storehouse and unsealed a brand new padlock that had been inside a small box. What should I do with the key? I will take it. I will take responsibility and hand it over to the police. Thus he took the key to the padlock from Genji's hand. After that, they all exited and lowered the shutter. And so the corpses were once again sealed behind the shutter, which was still covered with that creepy magic circle. Genji crouched down in front of the shutter to fasten the new padlock. Shutters often have a place in front where you can attach your own lock, in addition to the main lock of the shutter. This was one of those types. In the midst of the roar of thunder and the pouring rain, the storehouse stood there ominously, with its closed shutter still covered in a blood-like creepy substance. Yeah. And as he putting the new lock on wasn't mainly to preserve the scene for the police. She might have felt like she wanted to shut their mouth for all eternity, to prevent the eerie beast from swallowing up any more victims. Come on, let's go everyone. Dr. Nanjo, thank you very much for your work. Genji, hurry and contact the police. I will do so as soon as I return. The adults left the storehouse. The ghastly magic circle drawn on the shutter kept the 6 bodies in its throat, looming eerily as the lightning occasionally lit it up. Okay. Okay. We're at 8:45. Ooh. Okay. We're gonna save and think about what just happened. Is there any new pips? Nope. But 6 people have died. Hold. Oh, and the blood stain indicates which part of their face is missing. Okay. Well, I did not anticipate so many people dying all at once. If people die one by one, then there's fewer constraints on how that could have happened. But like 6 people dying all at once, and some of them probably would have stuck together like Rudolph and Kilie. So it'll be difficult to take them out one by one, thinking from the culprit's perspective. Alright, a few things. First of all, the fact that some of them have their faces fully obscured and some not makes me think there's probably something to that. So, like, we are sure this is Shannon and this is Cross. And we're probably sure this is Goda. We're less sure about these three people. And also, the perspective character, Battler didn't actually get a very close look on the bodies. You could say maybe Nanjo is the only one who really checked close up. So maybe there is a chance that one of the corpses was not actually dead. It's less likely for one of these people, one of these three, with like part of their face still intact, to be faking death. I don't know. I don't know. Like, I don't know what kind of story this is. So I don't know if I should accept that as a thing that could happen in this story. Another thing to mention is the like supernatural elements. Like it's a murder mystery with supernatural elements. So if you go full supernatural, all of this that has happened doesn't even need a really realistic explanation. You could just say, well, the witch did all of that. And the witch, equipped with supernatural means, none of the usually puzzling elements of a murder mystery is truly an obstacle for a witch. But that would make the story very boring. But I also feel like if all of the hinting at supernatural elements are all just some human obscuring their crime, that would also be boring in this story. It'll be fun. It'll be more fun if there truly is some supernatural element, and at the same time, the supernatural element is not what uh, executed the crimes. So it's the most fun if the supernatural elements are true, and also some guy just committed all the crimes as a person. So I'm just gonna, I'm only going to think about the crime as if I know that it's just a person. There's no like supernatural witch involvement. So what had to happen? Kill the people, put them in a storehouse, lock the door, draw a magic circle on the door. Okay. I don't know if there's enough to come up with any conclusion at this point. Hmm. Because it's just so outrageous. And according to Nanjo, they've been dead for like 6+ hours, so they actually died not long after midnight. Hideyoshi and Eva claimed that after midnight they went to bed soon. And Natsu was shown the one gold bar, and then she went back to her room, presumably because she's disappointed. And the kids were playing cards or something. Maria was sleeping. George went back to the guest house after parting with Shannon. Actually, I don't think we saw Shannon putting on the ring. We saw her going to Goda and was told to lock the doors and windows, and she went and did that. We never saw her putting on the ring, I don't think. But she had the ring on when she's discovered. Huh. What could the faces mean? Like, what would the point of this be? Obscuring faces. Like, if there isn't a 19th person, then obscuring faces on its own does nothing. Because, like, what can you possibly do? You could switch Kirie's body with Rosa's body. They're still the two people that had to be there. So what difference does it make? This is why I was suspecting maybe one of them or more are like pretending to be dead with their like facial features obscured. And because nobody except for Nanjo really took a closer look, they could be pretending to be dead. Rudolph suspected that he was gonna die during the night, but we don't know why he had that premonition. And what was the butterflies about? What would be the point of drawing the magic circle? Also, who's clawing at Natsu's door? What the fuck? Kenji and Kanon seem to know something about Kinzo's ceremony, but are they aware that Shannon could have died from that? So interesting. But I don't know if there's much I can say right now. And I should also stop it here. It's 2 a.m. I don't think I can keep going today. Well, we'll just have to continue tomorrow and see. Alright, see ya.